What's up, everyone? Welcome back to episode 3 of 5 and 5. We're here live with my man, Matt Dunn, and we're really excited to go through a couple clips from Ohio State Hopkins and Army Syracuse. A lot of great games, a lot of lacrosse over the weekend. Matt, welcome back. How are you feeling?
Thanks, man. I'm feeling good. Feeling good. Pumped to see another weekend of lacrosse on. Got some really good games, actually. Some really interesting stuff out there. So I'm good, dude. Really excited to kind of go through these clips and check them out.
If you haven't already, make sure you check out our Coach's Corner on firstclasslax.com. Matt and I both posted threads from this Ohio State game, talking about the offense and their four outlook for Ohio State, as well as the zone D, some man sets, and man down defense for Ohio State. So make sure you check those out. The link will be in the bio. Matt, why don't you start us off? Take us through this first quarter. We have Ohio State Hopkins. It's 3-1 in the first quarter. Ohio State is running their zone defense.
Yeah, like you said. So to your point, building off that, we did post the blog, and it was interesting watching Ohio State play. I actually thought their defense was very well run this game. They have great personnel, but I also think they had great schemes and executed very well. Ohio State kind of flipped between a man and a zone, which we'll talk a little more about. That I thought was a really good strategy for a couple reasons. It works well throughout the year. You see a lot of teams kind of sprinkle a zone at the end of a quarter, or a low shot clock to give an offense a different look, really, freezing them up and forcing them to eat some clock, trying to figure out, what set to get into, how to run against it. I think Ohio State did it very strategically throughout the game. And I also, in my opinion, just them looking at Hopkins coming in with not, a ton of preseason experience, getting a zone look and having to stick work it against a defense rather than be able to go straight up against a man could be pretty tough. I think that's what we saw here.
Yeah, and just again, this is early season. Johns Hopkins unfortunately didn't have a fall ball, and just one of the kind of downsides of what's going on with COVID. So we know them with a new staff and good players are going to keep growing throughout the year, which will be exciting to watch. But we wanted to spend time to just highlight Ohio State as they're a really strong looking team in the top 10 in the Big Ten.
Yeah, if we go back, why don't you go to the start real quick, and I'll kind of talk through the zone, and we'll go through the clip pretty quickly. So off the start, if you freeze it here, just so we can get a feel. I'm going to rewind like a second or two. We can look at just this is how their base zone is set up. So we have, five guys on the perimeter, short stick top center, two poles on the top corners, two poles on the low bases, and a short stick in the middle. And I think, I'm guessing here by watching, but I have a pretty good feeling that the roles are the short stick on the crease is basically meant to take all ball side cutters. So he's not really supposed to fire off the crease at any reason except for like an absolute emergency where there's a guy that he has to fly to, but his role is to own the crease. Short stick top center kind of passes things back and forth. He ideally plays back and forth across the top center until one of the wing poles can pass off the dodge from him as it gets farther to one of the sides. He snaps back top center. And then we'll see the low bases actually mirror. So as the ball goes to X, one of them is going to play the ball back at X, and the other is going to fill into the crease and go to the opposite side of the ball. So if the ball carries across X from the right to left, the left base is going to flip spots with the right base. So you're basically playing, man at X with everybody flipping behind it. So just notice that as we go, and it's interesting because we'll see how some of these spots shift throughout the zone. So you can play it here. And we'll see right here as Ohio State, you can keep going. As Hopkins starts to pull over, Ohio State actually gets their first rotation in. So the shorty's now in the top left of the zone. So that's the first rotation. And you keep it going here. What Ohio State did a nice job of is really getting the sticks in the passing lanes. And once again, right there, that's the second rotation. So ideally at this point, if Hopkins doesn't press that back pipe there, number 37 is probably the other low base, and he's probably going to try to rotate or mirror back to that back pipe if that cutter never crashes. But because he's stretched so far over initially, he has no option to get back. So Ohio State's forced to rotate, which they do a nice job of. And this is one of the reasons I actually think their zone did so well, is because this is where zones get beat. And I know, Deemer, we were talking a little bit about this, but as offenses are able to drag and force teams to stretch out to the corners of their zone, that is where the zone has to make a decision of whether they're going to pass or rotate. And Ohio State actually did a nice job of recognizing those threats and rotating there.
Yeah, it's interesting too, Matt, to see, just the versatility. I think Tarafenko it's well documented. He's, the best or one of the best short stick defensive midfielders in the college game. To see him in the zone, start top center, really have high IQ, understand the rotations. Now he's playing low. You see him in the mirror spot, like you're talking about.
Yeah, and the crazy, he does it so naturally. That's exactly what he's supposed to do, right? So balls at X, they trust their matchup back there. I love that, and this is great. This is what I'm pretty sure Coach Crane's teaching them there. Hey, trust the matchup. Your job is actually you're supporting the inside now. So when you're mirroring, you actually look and find an inside guy because they might probably going to cut more than one guy through the crease. So inside guy takes ball side. The mirror, Tarafanko here, tries to take the back pipe cutter or the guy the inside guy's not taking. And they're going to show help adjacently from the wings if they have to help it all to X.
Yeah, you can see here he does do a really nice job of opening up.
Finds the cutter, yep.
And Cole Williams gets a stick there, exchanges.
And there he leaks out the back pipe there. Boom, the inside guy waits for another cutter in the middle. Now the back wing's helping down, right? That back wing helps down, and now he's drifting up with the cutter. Here's actually a nice one. If you keep watching this, watch that cutter right there. You see how the inside guy switches over to the ball side cutter? Let's watch that again. The inside guy is supposed to take ball side cutters. So he's looking away from the ball at all times. He goes there, the back wing passes him in, and the back wing crashes to the backside cutter. So the inside guy is meant to look away from the ball. Whenever a ball side cutter comes flying through, he jumps to that. And then the backside is going to rotate down and fill any kind of like back floating cutters. Now, here's an interesting spot, Deemer. I know we were talking about this, and that's Tarafanko is now 3 rotation spots essentially away from where he started. And there's a reason that Ohio State wanted their poles in the perimeter and their shorties in a certain spot. It's because, down here in these low base areas, especially if a team, has pretty savvy attackmen or can play in those corners, it's a little more of a threat pushing the corner. Granted, to Ohio State's benefit, Tarafanko is a very good D-midi. But this, to me, as an offensive player, I'd be curious to hear your thought. You get a guy, a shorty now in that low spot where your attackman is. This feels to me like a spot where you'd want to try to press against a zone you're struggling to get leverage against.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And I think, I remember the first time in, early college, we started operating against, I think it was Loyola College's zone defense. We started thinking about kind of dragging and popping behind the carry. And I think here, what this starts to look to me like is an opportunity for Hopkins to turn this 2-on-2 into a sideways 3-on-2. And, what I would like to see, again, is as we start to carry and initiate and drag up the wing, we're looking for that pass off point, that point to where Tarafanko has to snap back to his base responsibility and the adjacent corner defender having to help down and pick up that responsibility. Here you can see that hedge, and this is where I think this can become, a 3-on-2 if we get this attackman at X following on this carry.
Yeah.
But this midfielder high being ready to step down into this gap, this gap between the center defender and the adjacent hedge. And so that's where, one of the biggest things I like to think about in the zone is stepping in gaps and re-engaging so that you can work and get those defenders to snap back, step in and be a threat, draw, and then move it to the according spot to then cause another rotation, right? Because that's where we would be able to take advantage if this defender up top fired across to worry about the step down threat, or because Tarafanko maybe would get dragged up more up the wing, this base defender would have to fire over, and then maybe we would create advantages on the backside.
Yeah, the interesting thing is, and it doesn't happen as much here because, playing in zone, you still have to be a good on-ball defender because essentially your adjacent teammate in a zone, not only you're supposed to pass it to him when he transfers between zones, but he's also your support. So if Tarafanko gets beat there or any leverage by the Dodger, that wing guy's to crash down. As soon as he crashes down, just like in a slide, you have 2 to the ball there. With a quick pass, you get a rollover, 2 on the ball. And now all of a sudden you have 3 defenders to 2 offensive guys, which means you have, 4-on-3 on the backside. So really that's how you beat a zone, and that's how it's a zone you don't want to get beat. As a zone, you don't want to have 2 guys on the ball, but you also can't have 0 guys on the ball. So strategically finding a way to pass quickly and go find another guy, or to rotate well so that you're getting to new spots, so that you never have 2 guys to the ball, or you don't pass when you think you're going to and give a guy a step down in a gap.
Yeah, and Matt, I think here as this forward pass happens, this is where as we step in, being ready to follow and re-engage back in the play is big, because you're going to see
Right.
the center defender is going to bump back over. This
Yeah.
corner defender is recovering back, and watch this other base defender. This is where if we can get to the pipes and put some pressure on the pipes, he's opening up because he's starting to expect the flow of the ball to come all the way out here.
Right.
And that's where, we have to kind of take a couple steps, look like we're going to continue to swing it, and then throw back, and because to your point of Tarafenko being a short stick, that's where we can take advantage, because regardless of how, skilled anyone is, you're just playing with a shorter stick, less stick to be able to throw to the inside and make that passing lane look covered. And then when you follow from this wing and step into this gap, now you're really taking a 3-on-2 or like, a 1-on-2 across the top and turning it into a 2-on-1 in this low wing spot.
Yeah, I think that's the right look. And if you play it forward here, you'll see like that's kind of where the look ends up being. He just makes a tougher look to it, right? As you're carrying one way, like the defense is flowing that way. So that pull back pass is really where the opportunity is. He just kind of made, and this is the point of like why go zone for Ohio State here. It's like, well, Hopkins probably, their sticks aren't the sharpest, they're not at game speed probably with limited play. So that's why you miss that. But if he even pulls it back to the guy who just threw it to him in that scenario, right? He's carrying across and that back pipe pushes. Well, now you do kind of have that potential 2-on-1 there or 3-on-2 as the whole Ohio State defense, as you can see, if you draw like a diagonal line, there's 5 guys on one side where there's 4 Hopkins guys, right? So you see all 5 of the, right there, right? So if he keeps carrying over and gets that quick pass back to this guy pulling up, and if Tarafenko has to pull up to help there, and that back and the guy X pulls over, now you got some pressure on the backside.
Yeah, and Matt, this also reminds me too, for our viewers, if you didn't see our breakdown last week, this starts to look similar to the look Kevin Lindley got against Richmond, where as this, this pass swings to the wing, imagine this player kind of popping or curling to the ball in this direction. And even if, 3 hits one more to the base, he could then look inside to that cutter flashing down the pipe. So again, it starts to take, a look that is, even 6-on-6 zone in something that, kind of a 4-person overload that we see some teams start to get even in a man-up scenario. And that's where it's, again, trying to get the ball going one way and then create overloads as we start to throw back.
Yeah, it's a really good point.
We're going to take that right into, Army Syracuse, and we're going to get into a nice man-up set for Army. They scored earlier in the game, right as time expired. They hit a nice skip from Bobby Absher down to the pipe with Brendan Nichtern. Here, you're going to see Nichtern again show up at the pipe, number 20, one of Army's best players. They're starting the 3-high look, 3, and really just 3-high, really in just a circle here. And as this ball swings to the wing, we're going to come back to this cut through. Ball swings back up top. Nice skip to the pipe. And again, one thing that we didn't even touch on as much in the Hopkins clip just shows the benefit of having sharp sticks, being able to put the ball on a rope on someone's ear, taking pride in your passing. And it allows them to find the skip lane, quick catch and finish early in the man-up set.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say too, is that point of just like, this is not, I want to say there's probably, you could, play Monday morning quarterback here and say Syracuse could have done this and this different. It's really a really good pass on the stick and a quick release from, not a great spot, but it happens so fast. But this ball just being in and out so quickly here, the guy's closing on it. Like the low base is closing on it. The guy on the wing is not like terribly outside the lane. Maybe he could sit a little more in that lane there. But I would chalk it up. Maybe they could have done some things differently to cover up for it, but it's a really nice play. And it's a really good, line drive pass on the ear to a quick release right there. If that ball's, at his, if he has to reach inside to catch it there and it's just to bring it back, that low base is probably on him in time before he can release it.
Yeah, and to that point, Matt, number 44 does a good job of what I believe you and Matt McMahon have filmed for our FCL online library, but that's dragging the stick in the passing lane, right? And so watch how 44 actually changes hands here as he's approaching out to drag that stick and have it in his left. And again, he could have probably sat just a tad more. But he's at least aware of it. But again, just kind of shows you at this level when you've got, two top 10 teams battling, just the windows are small, right? And you got to be ready to, you got to be ready to throw it with confidence.
Yeah, you make a good point of like, he's thinking about that pass lane. He has it. I think what Army actually kind of this tricks defenses on field awareness is because Army's so spaced out here. Syracuse, instinctively wants to spread out with that. And what happens then is now you have one less player with more space means more opportunities to skip the ball through. So you have to fight that instinct a little bit as offenses get spaced out, realizing that, hey, just because that guy is, so wide, keep it rolling here, freeze. Just because that guy on the wing's so wide, he's actually, we get in this feel like we have to go flat and play guys. And we see this all the time when we do our, training sessions, we do 3-on-2s and one guy on the wing and one guy standing like can't shoot from there for his life. But one guy wants to go out and play him because he's so instinctively taught to do that. But by doing that, he creates a 2-on-1 closer to the goal. So you actually, as guys are further away, you can actually go the opposite way rather than drift out with them in man down scenarios. You can hold the passing lane longer because that guy's not a threat. And as that guy starts to creep in a little, then you can start timing up your approach out to him. So it makes sense, but instinctively, on the field, you see a guy that far out, like I got to start flying out to him, but really holding that lane for another second and kind of turning your head to find the lane. We talk about not just putting your stick where you think the lane is, but see if you can turn your head and see where the cutter's coming to. Are you in that lane or are you just kind of like holding your stick on the inside?
Yeah, to that point, I mean, I think that's something that, sometimes as shooters, we get too much credit with guys flying out. I think Army, is a really well coached team, really well disciplined. You can only imagine, when you're down 2 goals, right, with 3 minutes left in the half and you're 15 minutes into a man up possession, this is not going to take, this guy's not going to take this shot. I
Right.
think that 90 to 95% that if you're a second or even 2 seconds later, that this guy's not just going to come in and uncork this from 12 yards. And so it's almost just like, but again, it's hard in the moment. It's easy for us to sit here and say that, but for young players that are watching, the more you continue to think about maybe what you're going to give up or what that guy is realistically trying to take, and your scout and things like that, the more you can try and bait people into those, different situations and see, again, you got a top class goalie in the cage.
Right.
He'd rather see that shot early in a man up possession.
Right. It's also one of those things that like, if you're flying to a guy and man down, the only reason you want to fly to a guy is if he's tight. And when you do that, you actually get some pressure on him because that eliminates his ability to throw those quick passes. But if you're not going to be able to get pressure to a guy, you actually want to get there a little later, right? If he's not a shooting threat, you'd almost rather a guy at 14 yards think twice about stepping in to shoot it. And when he shoots it, you meet him with a stick at like 12 or 13. And then he kind of is like, maybe I should have passed it, and like kind of thinking rather than you fly at a guy, his decision becomes very easy. Or you see a guy flying out, like the skip lane opens up. But if you see guys kind of sitting patiently, it's kind of like you're a little thrown off as an offense because the guy adjacent's not a shooting threat. And now you don't see the skip lane as easily.
Yeah, great points all around. And this was a great game. And, we're going to take this into our last clip where, we talk about some pick play. Army scored a couple goals off of some goal line picks, which we're going to see here. We'll let the clip play through, starting in the high alley, nice patience. It's 6'4" Cuse, a second up pick here. We'll come back to that double team. I want to hear your thoughts on that, Matt. And then a nice quick roll back and switch pick, crash the back pipe, A really nice play here, for Army hooking up a big goal in their comeback. Matt, let's take it back to, the first pick in that high alley. What are some things that you're thinking about?
Yeah, I like how they play it. So the first pick, that one's fine. What I like there is the Syracuse defender. His man sets the up pick, drifts up into no man's land, not a threat at all, and the defender kind of holds that low anchor as to not, just leave the underneath open. So I think that's smart. Um, let's keep going. Let's hit that quick double there. Because I think this is fine. It's well played. Nothing really, no harm, no foul. Nothing really
There's
happens.
no need to slide off of, 20, who's, pretty well known as Army's top threat, right? So
Right, right,
that's
exactly.
as much of a threat down the alley to the weak hand, probably. Now we get this second pick here coming off the
Yeah,
crease.
yeah, I actually like this. We kind of talked, we posted some stuff on Twitter and Instagram about how Virginia upped the tempo against Army. And I like what Syracuse does there. And that's a great opportunity to up the tempo. If a team's going to set a tight up pick, on the hashes, you can try to jump that because what you can't do is play that soft because if a guy comes off it, hands free, that's a shot. He's moving directly towards the goal. Usually guys are going to come off those up picks hard because the up pick is set downhill for the guy to get a shot. So if you're strategic with it, it's not a bad time to let the on ball guy gets over it, underneath guy jumps it. And if you can turn it back there, it's a great opportunity to jump it. So I like that. And you see where they force the ball, there's really no pressure because they get the ball so wide, he can't make looks anyways. So they still recover fine. So I actually like that occasional jump call on the up pick right there.
Yeah, I do too. And I think, as an offensive player, it's always hard if you get jumped, in like a quick double off of a pick, to execute that throwback. And I think again, they get his hands free. He does a nice job of escaping pressure, but again, they don't get the quick throwback. And I think this defender would be ready to rotate into it anyway. I almost wonder here too if they can, time up this angle even more,
Yeah.
actually squeeze and trap the double versus it kind of looks like he cuts off the original on ball defender a little bit. Um,
Yeah.
so
My guess is that may have been the plan and he was just a little late to it, or it wasn't the plan and he just kind of made the read of like, there might be contact and I have to switch on contact. If there's a plan though, yeah, exactly. Like you would rather almost stack yourself up with that up picker's back and have this come off like like just straight jump out perpendicular to the pick and crack it back because that on ball guy is coming right through.
yeah, great points. And then we'll take it into kind of the third segment of this. And I think this is again, if you actually tuned into one of our earlier episodes, Army, had a really nice goal, against Virginia, out on the low wing, rolling back. Nick Turn has really nice change of direction. Got underneath, threw it forward. They turned the corner on the lefty hash. Here, now he's approaching towards X. Short stick, sets what I like to call a switch pick, where he flips his hips around at the last second. That leaves 9 a little bit out of position, to help. And then again, with that nice change of direction, he's able to absorb the contact, and the high physicality, from this defender, and then explode back upfield, and then hit the back pipe for a nice right hand, right pipe crash there.
Yeah, yeah, and I think those gate picks, those switch picks are tough. I think 9 makes an okay read of like the switch. You're not really sure if the on-ball defender is at a good angle. He doesn't seem to get picked off by it, but he tries to get over it, so it changes angle a little. Quite frankly, that doesn't even mess up the play as much because there's no leverage there. It doesn't even seem like guys are that caught up in it. To me, it's really when the ball's at X, there are so many dangerous players on the field because the feeder is looking up and everybody looking down is a shooter or quick stick cutter, basically. So if you're an off-ball defender and the ball's at X, ball watching is so dangerous because right now, any feed inside, especially at this level with these guys, it's basically a quick stick and goal. And so when these guys start crashing down, not only do you have to be able to see your guy, but you have to be in a position to absorb cuts. One thing to think about the balls at X, guys are going to want to mostly cut to you, right? If you're the crease guy, because they're going to crash towards the goal. So you want to be ready to absorb cuts and you can't let cutters behind you. So to do that, you actually want to have your hips and chest facing more towards the cutters than to the ball, especially if you're not an immediate hot guy where that you have a ton of support behind you. So 11 right here on Syracuse, I would actually think get my butt around more towards the end line here and be more ready to absorb cuts. Because if your hips are towards the ball and your butt's towards the middle of the field, there's no way you can absorb that cut in time. So I would say, to me, it's just really that posture and positioning inside, and why it's really underrated to just have great posture inside, because things happen fast. You can't just be in the right spot. He's not in a bad spot. You have to be like actively ready to crash on a cut.
Yeah, and look, your basketball career is much more well documented than mine at Loyola Wakefield, but I feel like I remember doing drills where we would, really have to, see man, see ball, and then sink to the level of the ball.
Yeah.
I'm looking at 44 here. Where my mind goes is, again, take that diagonal line and go through. And if, why not, if he could flip his hips around, right? He could keep everyone on the Army offense in front of him. He would
Yeah.
be quicker to see 14 crashing towards him on that back pipe. So if we fast forward, as he starts to turn, he's actually now trying to find, and then just happens to miss. And then he starts
Right.
to step out as he's crossing his face. That all could have been avoided had he flipped his hips sooner and kept everything in front of him.
Yeah, and one way, so a lot of teams are doing this right now, and it's so common in college lacrosse, is this big little look, and then this kind of like, spaghetti or coordinated cut action up top. And ideally, what you want to do in these scenarios, at least in my opinion, is more like whatever spot you're in, don't cross pass with your teammate here. If a cutter cuts between you and a teammate, you'd rather just pass that cutter in between. But to do that, you have to be able to see your teammates. And to your point, 44's chest has to be towards his teammates. 11's chest and head has to be more towards his teammates, especially as those two inside guys. That way, like, 44 could have taken the backside cutter, or 11 could have, or either one could have, but they would need to see each other and communicate through that. Right now, basically, they have their backs towards each other, which just makes playing any type of off-ball defense, particularly this big little look where you're going to have cutters crashing down, so difficult.
Yeah, Matt, I think these are all great points. And again, it's February 24th. I think the exciting part, for all players, all coaches in college lacrosse, in, anyone who's starting their high school seasons, club, youth, whatever it is, it's a long spring, a lot of opportunities to get better, to keep growing, work on your positioning and technique, and, keep building that unit chemistry. So I'm really excited to keep watching all these teams week to week, because there's so much lacrosse on TV, a lot of opportunities, for guys to keep studying film and keep working on their games.
Yeah, me too. What I'm actually really excited for as this keeps going, to see the evolution of these college teams as we, break down a clip coming off, a historic lack of off season and lack of ability to prep in a team setting, and seeing, and quite honestly, these things we went through, they're very common mistakes at all levels for all teams. But just seeing how, like, teams continue to use man to zone, how teams decide to start playing a lot of these big littles, because we're going to see a ton of this big little action for the rest of the year, and just how teams find new ways to double and pick up tempo. I'm really interested to see how, as the season goes on, these teams get more time together, kind of what these clips look like, and 4 or 5 weeks from now.
Absolutely, Matt. Really appreciate your time. We hope everyone checks out our previous episodes on YouTube. Make sure you're checking out Matt and myself as we're breaking down things all over First Class Lacrosse and FCL Defense on Twitter, on Instagram, on our blog. We're going to keep it going all season. We'd love to hear your feedback. And again, our goal with this is to just continue to highlight, things that can be improved, but also things that teams are doing really well, so that you, players and coaches, can keep getting better and keep learning the game that we all love.